Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, and chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Currently, we are in the book of Judges, chapter 9. Now, as we move through the book of Judges, so of course, each judge, and remember, a judge was served two purposes. For the book of Judges, mainly a deliverer. God would raise up men. There was, of course, Deborah, to deliver Israel from their bondage. And of course, the bondage was the repeated sinning. They would fall into sin, fall out, and God would judge them through other nations. And God would raise up these judges. Now, also, judges serve as more administrators of the law. They kind of oversaw the law. They guided the people in the law. But for the book of Judges itself, it is they were deliverers, okay, because of their repeated sin. I also want to say that remember, some of the stories get very gruesome, so just It is the Bible. I don't know at what point why, as a society, we sought to shield people from the kind of hardness, the gruesomeness, But the Bible is very frank, and of course, it is not as gruesome as it could be, but it will be as we move through. All right, Judges chapter 9. It says, Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to his mother's brothers at Shechem and spoke to them and to all of his maternal grandfather's clan, saying, Please speak in the presence of all the lords of Shechem. Is it better for you that 70 men, all sons of Jerubbaal, rule over you, or that one man rule over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and blood. His mother's relatives spoke all these words about him in the presence of the lords of Shechem, and they were favorable to Abimelech, for they said, He is our brother. So they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the temple of Baal Berith. Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men with his money, and they followed him, and he went to his father's house in Ophrah and killed his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, on top of a large stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, survived because he hid himself. Then all of the lords of Shechem and of Beth Malo gathered together and proceeded to make Abimelech king at the oak of the pillar of Shechem. Now, of course, this is, again, we're going to see many stories like this. Ruthlessness. He kills all his brothers. Now, also keep in mind the time of Judges and pretty much all of the Old Testament of Israel was pure wickedness. They sold themselves to pagan worship and pagan practices. So we see the kind of, in fact, at the end of the Judges, he's going to make the statement that everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So, all right, verse 7. When they told Jotham, he climbed on top of Mount Gizrim, raised his voice and called to them, Listen to me, lords of Shechem, and may God listen to you. The trees set out to anoint a king over themselves. They said to the olive tree, Reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, Should I stop giving my oil that honors both God and man, and rule over the trees? Verse 10, Then the tree said to the fig tree, Come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, Should I stop giving my sweetness and my good fruit, and rule over the trees? Later the tree said to the grapevine, Come reign over us. But the grapevine said to them, Should I stop giving my wine that cheers both man and God, and rule over the trees? Finally, the trees Finally, all the trees said to the bramble, "Come reign over us." And the bramble said to the trees, if you really are anointing me as king over you, come and find refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come down from the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Now, if you have acted faithfully and honestly in making Abimelech king, if you have done well by Jerubbaal and his family, and if you have rewarded him appropriately for what he did, for my fathers fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you from the hand of Midian. And now you attack my father's house today, killed his 70 sons on top of a large stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his slave, king over the lords of Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you have acted faithfully and honestly with Jerubbaal and his house this day, rejoice in Abimelech, and may he also rejoice in you. But if not, may fire come down from Abimelech and consume the lords of Shechem and Beth Millo, and may fire come from the lords of Shechem and Beth Millo and consume Abimelech. Then Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and lived there because of his brother Abimelech. Now remember, he had killed his other 70 brothers. He escaped, which means that Abimelech wanted to kill him as well. Now they did this, of course, to rule. Abimelech was consolidating his kingdom, and of course back then the heirs of the kingdom, Jerubbaal, remember, who was Gideon, remember Gideon defeated Midian with 300 men. And so this is why Jotham is saying that. Now look what my father has done for you, and this is how you repaid him. All right, verse 22. When Abimelech had ruled over Israel 3 years, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the lords of Shechem, and they treated Abimelech deceitfully. Now we're going to see this phrase, a evil spirit, come up later as well. And the best way, I guess, to kind of understand this is how God is ruling from the heavens. Okay, that here you see behind the scenes, that Abimelech, as evil as he was, will never ever get exactly what he wants. So the term an evil spirit, and it is kind of interesting. We don't have a lot of detail on it, so we can only just kind of gather. God from heaven ruled. In other words, all God has to do is nothing. Right? Just think about this for a moment. That all God has to do is nothing, and everything would come crashing down on us. So God is actively, in a sense, holding up the walls to protect us. Think about as Israel went through the Red Sea. It was God who was restraining, right, the walls, the water behind his power, right? So when all of Israel went through the Red Sea, and then Egypt tried to follow, all God did was just stopped. He just stopped, and the waters crashed in and drowned all of the Egyptian soldiers. So when he says here, God sent an evil spirit, those evil spirits, the kingdom of Satan is out there, that all God has to do is nothing. You think about the turmoil that's going on in our world today. Excuse me. Think about the turmoil that is going on in our world today. Just think about that. How the right now, the turbulence, right? Ukraine, Russia. What will the future hold for that, right? Because in a sense, we're just kind of a strike away from what? Nuclear war, world war. Okay, so he says here, God sent an evil spirit. Now, of course, remember, if you are living in those days, you don't see this revelation. You don't see the fact that God sent an evil spirit. You see the effect. We see the effect of it. But, well, we're getting the revelation through the scriptures that it is an evil spirit. And then all of a sudden, his enemies are stirred up. Right? And that's what he means by this. God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the lords of Shechem, and they treated Abimelech deceitfully. Verse 24. So the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come to justice, and their blood would be avenged on their brother Abimelech, who killed them, and on the lords of Shechem, who helped him kill his brothers. The lords of Shechem rebelled against him by putting people on the tops of the mountains to ambush and rob everyone who passed by them on the road. So this was reported to Abimelech. Now, it's verse 26. Gaal, son of Ebed, came with his brothers and crossed into Shechem, and the lords of Shechem trusted him. So they went out to the countryside and harvested grapes from their vineyard. They trampled the grapes and held a celebration. Then they went to the house of their gods, and as they ate and drank, cursed Abimelech. So they kind of turned on Abimelech. And remember, this was from God, right? This betrayal, right? So verse 28. Now also keep in mind that they were also, look what they're doing. They're in the house of their God. Verse 28. Gaal, son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem that we should serve him? Isn't he the son of Jerubbaal, and isn't Jerubbaal his officers? You ought to serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. Why should we serve Abimelech? If only these people were in my power, I would remove Abimelech." So he said to Abimelech, "Gather your armies and come out." When Jerubbaal, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, son of Ebed, he was angry. So he sent messengers secretly to Abimelech, saying, "Look, Gaal, son of Ebed, with his brothers have come to Shechem and are turning the city against you. Now tonight you and the people with you ought to come and wait in ambush in the countryside. Then get up early at sunrise, charge the city, and when he and the people who are with him come out against you, do to him whatever you can." So Abimelech and all the people with him got up at night and waited in ambush for Shechem in 4 units. Gaal, son of Ebed, went out and stood at the entrance of the city. Then Abimelech and the people who were with him got up with their ambush, and when Gaal saw the people, he said to Jerubbaal, "Look, people are coming down from the mountains." But Jerubbaal said to him, "The shadows of the mountains, the shadow of the mountains look like men to you." Not talking about maybe dark shadows or something like that. Verse 37. Then Gaal spoke again, "Look, people are coming down from the central part of the land, and one unit is coming from the direction of the diviner's oak." Jerubbaal replied, Where is your mouthing off now? You said, "Who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Aren't these people you despise? Now go and fight them." So Gaal went out and leading the lords of Shechem and fought against Abimelech. But Abimelech pursued them, and Gaal fled before him, and many wounded died as far as the entrance of the gate. Abimelech stayed in Aruhah, and Jerubbaal drove Gaal from his brothers from Shechem. The next day, when the people went to the countryside, this was reported to Abimelech. He took the people and divided them into 3 companies and waited in ambush in the countryside. He looked and the people were coming out of the city. So he arose against them and struck them down. Then Abimelech and the eunuchs that were with him rushed forward and took their stand at the entrance of the city gate. The two other eunuchs rushed against all who were in the countryside and struck them down. So Abimelech fought against the city that entire day, captured it, and killed the people who were in it. Then he tore down the city and sowed it with salt. Now, of course, this salt probably was it ruined the ground. Kind of vicious if you think about it. In other words, he not only destroyed the city and it's killed the people, but he's making sure that no one can even grow anything on the land. Verse 46. When all of the lords of the tower of Shechem heard, they entered the inner chamber of the temple of Ebal. Then it was reported to Abimelech, and all the lords of the tower of Shechem gathered together. So Abimelech and all of the people who were with him went up to Mount Zalem. Abimelech took his axe in his hand and cut down a branch from the trees. He picked up the branch and put it on his shoulders and said to the people who were with him, "Hurry and do what you have seen me do." Each person also cut down his own branch and followed Abimelech. They put the branches against the inner chambers and set it on fire around the people. And all of the people in the tower in Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. So kind of interesting, this tower that people thought they were safe in actually turned out to be a death trap. Okay. Verse 50. Abimelech went to Thesbis and camped against it and captured it. And there was a strong tower inside the city. And all of the men, women, lords of the city fled there. They locked themselves in and went up to the roof of the tower. And when Abimelech came to attack the tower, he approached its entrance and set it on fire. But a woman threw an upper portion of a millstone, and Abimelech's head was fractured. Verse 53 again. But a woman threw an upper millstone the upper portion of a millstone on Abimelech's head and fractured his skull. He quickly called out to his armor bearer and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, or they'll say about me, a woman killed me." So his armor bearer thrust him through, and he died. And when all the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they all went home. In this way, God turned back on Abimelech the evil that he had done against his father by killing his 70 brothers. God also returned all of the evil of the men of Shebach on their dead. I'm going to go verse 57 again. And God also returned all the evil of the men of Shebach on their heads. So the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. Now, this last verse in 56 here, when it says, "In this way God turned back on Abimelech all the evil that he done," and then also God returned the evil of the men of Shechem on their head. These two verses, 56 and 57, kind of represent sort of a pattern and a standard that God judges. Okay, so on the one hand, it looks like, if you wanted to look at it from the natural, that Abimelech was winning all of his battles. But basically God was just using Abimelech to judge Shechem, and then God turned around and then judged Abimelech by having a simple woman throw a big rock, millstone, on his head. And by the way, this will be later for military strategy. Now, I'm going to tell you why. This is going to come up during the time when David, right? So David, just a couple of hundred years from this point here, that David, it's going to, when he does his wickedness with Uriah, and they're going to utter, his general is going to say, didn't Abimelech died the same way? My point is that these things would be studied, these military strategies here. In other words, don't do what Abimelech did, bad strategy. Don't go up so close to the wall. All right, guys. I'll pick it up in chapter 10 in the next study. I'll see you then.